Hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu News Analysis. Today is 6th November 2025 and here is the list of topics that we are going to discuss in today's class. And the first topic is Model Code of Conduct for Elections, and the second topic Contempt of Court, and third topic New SEZ Norms for the Exporters. So let's understand about this Model Code of Conduct. And in fact, because of Bihar elections, this Model Code of Conduct is in news. From the syllabus point of view, it is important from General Studies paper 2, and you can also see the syllabus which has been given by the UPSC for General Studies paper 2. From this perspective, it is important. Now in fact, we all knew that Bihar is going to go for elections, and in fact, if we talk about the Model Code of Conduct, it is in news because of the recent Bihar elections. And let's understand what is Model Code of Conduct. A Model Code of Conduct is a set of guidelines, and those guidelines are issued by the Election Commission of India. However, the objective of issuing a Model Code of Conduct to ensure free and fair elections and also regulate the political parties and their conduct as well during the elections. So this is the main objective, and apart from that, it also has another objective, that ensuring a level playing field while elections are being conducted, and in fact that would further result in free and fair elections. And in fact, a level playing field has to be ensured among the political parties and also candidates who have been contesting the elections as well. And in fact, the code of conduct will prevent the misuse of official machinery by the government for the electoral advantage. This is the objective of issuing Model Code of Conduct by the Election Commission of India when election schedule is announced. Now let's understand the history of the Model Code of Conduct, how it has evolved. We will also understand whether Model Code of Conduct has a statutory status or not. Now first, if you talk about the origin of the Model Code of Conduct, in the year 1960, it was first introduced during the Kerala Assembly elections. However, at that point of time, it was a voluntary code to regulate the political conduct of the political parties and the candidates contesting elections. However, in the year 1962, it was adopted at the national level, and in fact, it has been circulated by the Election Commission of India to all recognized political parties and states during the Lok Sabha elections, gaining an all-party consensus as well in the year 1962. However, in the year 1979 till 1991, there was an institutionalization of the Model Code of Conduct, because in fact, the MCC, which is otherwise called as Model Code of Conduct, gradually evolved through multiple elections. However, initially it began strict enforcement post 1991 to aimed at curbing corruption and also the misuse of power. So the objective of introducing Model Code of Conduct post 1991 is to curb corruption and also misuse of the power by the governments. However, in the year 2013, there was a legal refinement of the Model Code of Conduct, because it has been revised comprehensively after Subramaniam Balaji versus State of Tamil Nadu case, because in this particular case, a new guidelines on election manifestos to prevent misuse of freebies has been notified. So this is how Model Code of Conduct has evolved in India over a period of time. So you have to remember this evolution as well. Now let's understand the key features of Model Code of Conduct. Now if you look at the key features of Model Code of Conduct, now in fact, during elections, party campaigns, rallies, parties and the candidates must avoid communal appeals on the basis of religion, appeals on the basis of caste, ethnicity. So therefore, they must avoid these appeals and personal attacks as well. And apart from that, propaganda through religious places is also banned as per the Model Code of Conduct. And in fact, when Model Code of Conduct is enforced, the government ministers, they cannot announce new projects, they cannot announce the financial grants for various welfare programs, and they cannot make any ad hoc appointments after the election announcement, because immediately after election announcement, the Model Code of Conduct will come into existence. And apart from that, there are certain practices which are considered as corrupt practices within the Model Code of Conduct. So therefore, the MCC imposes ban on bribing, intimidation of voters, distributing liquor within 48 hours before the polling. So therefore, these are also the in fact some actions which are prevented under the model code of conduct. Now in fact, public media, transport, rest houses, they cannot be used for partisan purposes during the elections. Similarly, parties must justify the financial feasibility of the promises that they have been making during elections, right? So in order to influence the voters, in order to gain more votes, they cannot announce irrational schemes which actually reflect freebies. So therefore, parties must justify the financial feasibility of the promises that they have been making before the electorate. And apart from that, prior police permissions are mandatory to prevent clashes and also maintain order in that particular area. Now, in fact, the model code of conduct will be applicable for the political parties and candidates who are contesting elections. So if anybody is found violating the model code of conduct, now in fact, the Election Commission of India can also disqualify a person from contesting the elections as well. So these are the key features. So let's understand what exactly is the need for strong model code of conduct for a country like India. We all knew that India is a democracy and India is world's largest democracy in the world. And apart from being the largest democracy in India, the majority number of MPs and MLAs have a heinous criminal cases. Now, in fact, the lawbreakers are becoming lawmakers. So therefore, in this context, we need to have a strong model code of conduct to ensure a level playing field between different political parties and candidates who are contesting elections, and at the same time, conduct elections in a free and fair manner. So therefore, if we have a strong and robust model code of conduct, so it could be able to safeguard free and fair nature of elections. Now the objective is conducting elections in a free and fair manner by curbing misuse of administrative power, state funds, and even media influence during the campaigns. However, strengthening the model code of conduct, so it will deter the ruling parties from announcing new projects, because the model code of conduct clearly mentions that the ruling party and its ministers, they cannot announce new projects and grants for any such projects or welfare programs. So therefore, the official or the government may not misuse, it will not misuse the official machinery. It will not announce new project. It will not announce the cash transfers that unfairly sway voter sentiment near the elections or unfairly influence the voter sentiment during the elections. For example, Bihar is going to see elections this month. So therefore, Bihar Mukhyamantri Mahila Rozgar Yojana 2025 has been announced by the government. However, it has been criticized for influencing voters through pre-poll dispersals. However, as per the model code of conduct, such schemes, announcement of such new schemes is prohibited. And apart from that, a stringent and a strong model code of conduct, so it will prevent the unsustainable welfare promises, because if a government, if a political party is making promises before the electorate, and in fact, if they are not financially sustainable, then the government need to look for the feasible welfare promises. The government need to make, the political party need to make a feasible welfare promises. So they should not make unsustainable, unfeasible welfare promises. And again, it also amounts to the violation of model code of conduct, because a political party has been making unfeasible political promises to influence the voters in an arbitrary and unjust manner. So even if the government announces such unsustainable welfare promises, they will act as a burden on the public exchequer for the political or electoral gain. So therefore, the objective is to ensuring a level playing field between the candidates, political parties who have been competing for the elections. And apart from that, by guaranteeing impartiality, a strong model code of conduct, so it enforces citizens' trust in democratic institutions and credibility in the electoral outcomes as well. So that's how there is a need for strong model code of conduct, that Election Commission of India need to implement this model code of conduct in a letter and spirit. However, there are certain challenges which are being associated with the model code of conduct. So let's understand what are those challenges and the suggestions to overcome those challenges as well. Now, first of all, we have to understand that the Model Code of Conduct lacks the legal enforceability. That essentially means that there is no legal sanction behind the Model Code of Conduct, but it is just a voluntary code that is being implemented by the Election Commission of India. So therefore, it actually reduces the ability of Election Commission of India to impose punitive measures if anybody violates the Model Code of Conduct. So therefore, the need of the hour is providing legal sanction to the Model Code of Conduct, so that MCC will also have a legal enforceability, so that the Election Commission of India can impose punitive measures if anybody found violating the Model Code of Conduct. Secondly, the government often reliable or accelerate schemes under the guise of continuity. So therefore, in fact, it also violates the Model Code of Conduct, and the objective of Model Code of Conduct is to make sure that the government is not misusing its official machinery. The government is not misusing its existing powers, and providing a level playing field among all political parties and candidates is very important component of Model Code of Conduct. However, when government announces new schemes before the elections, it amounts to violation of the Model Code of Conduct. For example, Telangana's rebranded subsidy program in the year 2023, so it continued dispersal despite the Model Code of Conduct restrictions. So therefore, such violations are also seen, and in fact, there are the legal cases on MCC violations, so they move sluggishly, outliving the election cycle and ultimately rendering enforcement toothless as well. For example, complaints from 2019 Lok Sabha polls were still under inquiry 2 years later as well. And next, we have to understand the rise of artificial intelligence generated propaganda, deepfakes. So they further undermine traditional Model Code of Conduct oversight mechanisms, right? So cybersecurity is also very, very important in this context. And apart from that, the ruling political parties very often found to resist the stricter MCC norms because they cite executive independence and governance continuity. So ultimately, it results in Election Commission of India's institutional authority. It will weaken the EC's institutional authority if governments continues to resist the stricter MCC norms. So therefore, there is a need for reforms, there is a need for providing legal sanction to the Model Code of Conduct, and there is also a need for a strict punitive actions if anybody found violating the Model Code of Conduct, even if the candidate from the ruling political party. Right, so that's how you can also write these suggestions, and I hope you have understood this topic as well about the Model Code of Conduct. And next, very important topic is contempt of court. An article has been given in the Hindu newspaper, and this is particularly important from General Studies paper 2. The syllabus of it has been given here. Now let's understand what is contempt of court and what are the constitutional provisions it has been dealing with. But before discussing that, let's understand why contempt of court is in news. Now recently, derogatory remarks have been made against Chief Justice of India, and in fact, there are also incidents of insulting Chief Justice of India by throwing shoe at the face of Chief Justice of India. So therefore, such incidents have been came to light recently. However, all these incidents have sparked a debate over the contempt of court. Now, in fact, these debates have also raised questions about the judicial authority, freedom of speech of individuals, and the limits of public criticism, particularly individuals criticizing the judiciary under the Indian Constitution and Contempt of Court Act of 1971, because the Contempt of Court Act 1971 defines civil contempt and criminal contempt. Now, in fact, there are some constitutional articles as well, Article 129 and Article 215 of the Indian Constitution. So, in fact, they gives powers of Supreme Court and High Courts as court of record which includes the powers to punish for contempt of itself, right? So contempt of court essentially means that if Supreme Court or High Court gives an order and an individual refused to follow those orders, then Supreme Court or the High Courts or any other court can issue the contempt provisions against the individual or the organization. Now, in fact, Article 142 Clause 2, it says that, or it enables Supreme Court to investigate, punish any person for its contempt as well, right? So therefore, these two articles which deals with the contempt provisions of Supreme Court and High Court. Now, as I've already told you that contempt is two different types. One is civil contempt, second is criminal contempt. Now, civil contempt means a willful disobedience to any judgment that has been given by the courts. Now, whether it is a judgment, order, writ, or any other process of a court. Now, in fact, a willful breach of an undertaking given to a court, so everything is classified under the civil contempt. However, let's understand what exactly is a criminal contempt. Here, criminal contempt means publication of any matter or doing any act which first scandalizes or lowers the authority of the court, firstly. Second, prejudices or interferes with the due course of a judicial proceeding. And third, interferes or obstructs administration of justice in any other manner, right? So all these categories of actions are considered as criminal contempt, and civil contempt just simply or willful disobedience to the orders, judgments, writs issued by the courts to an individual or an organization. So these are two different types of courts. So I hope you have understood the contempt, civil contempt and criminal contempt, and at the same time the constitutional provisions which have been dealing with the contempt of court. So let's understand the meaning and constitutional basis of contempt. Now, in fact, contempt of court appears in Article 19 Clause 2 as one of the grounds for restriction on freedom of speech and expression. Now, in fact, we all knew that Article 19 Clause 1 Subclause A, it talks about freedom of speech and expression. However, freedom of speech and expression is not absolute in nature. It is subjected to reasonable restrictions. There are some reasonable restrictions to this particular right. However, one such restriction is contempt of court, which has been mentioned in Article 19 Clause 2. Under Article 129 and 215, the Supreme Court and High Courts are designated as courts of record. Right? So they are also known as courts of record, meaning that whatever decisions that they have taken, they serve as a precedence and they possess the power to punish for a contempt as well. Now, in fact, these articles we have already discussed and understood. Article 129, the power of contempt given to the Supreme Court by the Constitution, and Article 215, the power of contempt given to High Court by the Constitution. And apart from these two constitutional provisions, the Parliament also passed Contempt of Courts Act 1971. This Contempt of Courts Act 1971, it provides the statutory framework defining and classifying contempt into civil contempt and criminal contempt categories. So therefore, the Contempt of Court Act 1971 has classified civil and criminal contempt, and we have understood what is civil contempt and criminal contempt. Civil contempt means a willful disobedience to the judgment, order, writ issued by the court. Criminal contempt means there are three categories of actions which might be considered as a criminal contempt. However, contempt laws exist to preserve the authority and dignity of the courts. Otherwise, everyone would start defying the authority of the court. And in fact, contempt also ensures the contempt law, the power of contempt also ensures smooth functioning of justice as well. However, the courts can also initiate the contempt proceedings on their own, which is also known as suo motu, and third parties may do so with the consent from the Attorney General or Advocate General as well. And in fact, this is the constitutional basis of contempt of court in India. So let's understand the Contempt of Court Act 1971, and in fact this has divided the contempt into civil contempt and criminal contempt. Now what is the objective? The objective is to maintain public confidence in the judiciary and at the same time to protect judicial independence. So these are the two important objectives of Contempt of Court Act 1971. First one is maintain public confidence and protecting judicial independence. However, if you look at the legal provisions of Contempt of Court Act 1971, Section 2 subclause B, it talks about or it defines civil contempt. Section 2 subclause C, it talks about defines criminal contempt. And in fact, Section 13, it protects truthful and fair criticism done in good faith, and it will not be considered as contempt, either civil or criminal contempt. So let's understand the judicial safeguards in this context. So as I've already told you that right to freedom of speech and expression, it has been mentioned in Article 19 clause 1 and subclause A. So in fact, it coexists with restrictions under Article 19 clause 2 to ensure there is an adequate balance between liberty and respect for the courts, right? So there are some judicial safeguards as well. Now Article 19 clause 1 subclause 2, freedom of speech and expression, is not an absolute right. There are some reasonable restrictions to it as well. So I hope you have understood what exactly is contempt and why the contempt of court is in news, because of the recent incidents, and those incidents have sparked a debate about the contempt of court provisions. Now next understand a very important topic, which is SEZ norms. From the syllabus point of view, it is very important for general studies paper 3, and the syllabus has been given here, and this article has been given in the Indian Express newspaper. Now it says that the government panel is working on new SEZ norms for exporters to access domestic market. So let's understand what are these special economic zones. First of all, special economic zones. So these special economic zones are geographically delineated duty-free enclaves, and in fact they are treated as foreign territory for the purposes of trade operations, duties and tariffs, right? So in fact, if there is a special economic zone, so the special economic zone is treated as a foreign territory, and it will be treated as a foreign territory for the purposes of trade, operations, duties and tariffs, right? I hope you have understood the definition of SEZ. However, why it is in news? So let's understand why specifically it is in news. It is in news because a government panel, and this government panel comprising the officials from Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Niti Aayog and exporters, they are formulating new SEZ norms. And in fact, the objective of formulating new SEZ norms is to revive manufacturing and support exporters who are adversely affected by the steep increase in US tariffs recent times. That's why it is in news, and that's why the government has been framing new norms, formulating new norms for the special economic zones to revive manufacturing and support exporters. However, this particular move from the government comes amid rising requests for denotification of SEZ units, and there are also demands for a reverse job work policy so that it could enable better domestic market integration. So that's why it is in news, and I hope you already knew what exactly is a special economic zone. However, what is the objective? Why special economic zones are being established? In fact, the special economic zones are being established as industrial areas because they are geographically delineated areas. Now, the objective of establishing special economic zone is to promote exports, attract domestic and foreign investment, generate employment, and also develop robust infrastructure, right? Because they could offer a more stable, business-friendly regulatory environment with variety of incentives. right? So this is the main objective. Now if I can write the objectives in a simple manner: employment generation, attracting foreign direct investment, and also develop robust infrastructure, manufacturing. So these are all the basic objectives of establishing SEZs in India. The concept of SEZ has been inspired from China, because in China SEZs are most successful, right? So however, if you look at the history and evolution of SEZs in India, in 1965 India's export processing zone, which is considered as the first export processing zone, EPJ, so that was established in Kandla, Gujarat. However, in the year 2000, the government has introduced SEZ policy. Now the objective of introducing SEZ policy is to increase exports, attract foreign direct investment into India. However, in the year 2005, SEZ Act has been framed by the government, and this has formalized SEZ regulation in India. However, in the year 2006, the government formulated rules, and the rules leading to the rapid growth of SEZ approvals throughout India, right? So this is how SEZ has been evolved in India over a period of time. However, if you look at the operations of special economic zones, now the special economic zones are actually given operational flexibility, right? So operational flexibility in the sense that 100% FDI is allowed in the special economic zones, right? So this 100% FDI, that too in an automatic route, not a government control, right? So therefore, the objective, the requirement for the units to be a net foreign exchange earner over a 5-year period, right? This is the requirement, and which is also eligible for 100% FDI through automatic route into the special economic zones. However, if you look at the data about the SEZs in India, currently India has 276 operational special economic zones, and these special economic zones spread across different states, focusing on a wide variety of industries, for example pharmaceuticals, IT, engineering, so all these different areas. However, let's understand some structural challenges that SEZs have been facing in India. For example, the number of SEZs have been declining over a period of time, because before 2019 there were around 500 gems and jewelry units, SEZ units, however, which reduced to just 360 units in the financial year 21-22. So therefore, it has been reflecting a policy uncertainty and even reduced fiscal incentives for the units which have been established at the SEZs. Secondly, we should also talk about the research and development investment. Now, in fact, the research and development investment in SEZs is also comparatively low, because only 4 of 14 surveyed SEZ units have invested in research and development. So therefore, it has been revealing minimal innovation focus. And then we should also talk about the skill and technology gaps. For example, there's a lack of modern training, inadequate funds, poor quality of upskilling programs. So these are some structural challenges that special economic zones have been facing. Now, if government has been formulating new norms for the SEZs, the government should also look at all these aspects. The government should address the structural challenges that SEZs have been facing. And in fact, weak FDI is also another major problem, because in recent years the FDIs coming into special economic zones are also less or low. So, for example, absence of investment protection agreements, this is one reason for weak FDI. And negative perception about Indian SEZs, this is the second reason for low investments, foreign direct investments into SEZ. And weak brand promotion and marketing efforts. So these are the main factors for a poor performance in terms of attracting the foreign direct investment. However, FDI is crucial for technology transfer, brand building, and global networking as well, right? So if the government has been formulating the new norms, New norms should essentially look into these aspects. However, what should be the way forward? Now, if we talk about the way forward, as we have already discussed, that the R&D investment is low in SEZs, and that is one of the factor which led to the poor performance of SEZ. So therefore, there is a need to focus on R&D and skill development by the SEZs. So for that to happen, there is a need to establish dedicated innovation funds and training centers within the special economic zones, and the government should establish them with the support of the private players. Secondly, the most important factor, that SEZs should be able to attract foreign direct investment. So therefore, introduce investment protection agreements, marketing initiatives. They can improve the overall special economic zone image. Then we should also try and streamline SEZ governance. For that to happen, simplify compliance and integrate SEZs within the logistics and industrial corridors. And in fact, sectoral support measures are also very important, particularly some sectors which have a robust potential for the growth, such as gems and jewelry, and offer credit relief, export extensions, and infrastructure upgrades as well. So these are all measures that have to be taken, that has to be considered in revising norms for SEZ. So that actually makes the SEZs could be able to attract FDI on a large scale. They could be able to perform better, and they could be able to provide gainful employment opportunities for the people. Right? So they could also be able to develop infrastructure in those areas. Right? So therefore, SEZ should be a robust success story for India. So that's all for today, and thank you so much. Please subscribe our YouTube channel and also like a video. Thank you so much.